The mid-afternoon light pours in shafts with little motes floating in the wind, pours across people crisscrossed, sitting together in the synagogue. It is the Sabbath, and people have come to hear the law read and to hear the word proclaimed. It's the Sabbath, a day of rest. A setting aside so that workers stop working and animals get a reprieve and families actually have time to enjoy one another. Even God rested on the Sabbath from creation. To set aside a day and to sit down and to forego all the tyrannies of the moment, the work or the children or the self-importance or the to-do list or the cooking, and just be. A reminder that though we might stop, God's goodness holds us fast. A reminder that life is made up not just of doing, but of being. And so yes, keep the Sabbath holy, because God has said so, but keep the Sabbath holy for one's own well-being. And Jesus finds himself teaching that Sabbath. The scroll is unrolled. He is busy proclaiming with great enthusiasm about the God who he is and whom he loves. And a woman comes in the back. She's bent over and moving at such a slow pace because that's all her condition will afford. Her spine is bent over and she can only shuffle. And she's been shuffling for so long, it's become her way of being. A shuffling so that she blends in, so that she becomes invisible. She takes all morning to get to synagogue. It's work, but no one wants to admit that it's work for her on the Sabbath to do it. And she's finally made it, and trying not to draw attention to herself. She shuffles too, hoping maybe that no one will notice. No one will pay attention. She's been like this for almost 2 decades. Her family has helped support her, but sometimes she has to beg, and that's a crippling of the soul. And what she most misses is looking at the sky, walking through the fields of grain and easily picking the heads from the stalks. But now she stares at the ground in a bid to go unnoticed. But Jesus notices her. He might be teaching, but he sees her come in, and all of the empathy of God goes out to her. And Jesus has a moment to decide what it is he's going to do. A quick second to run his options. It's the Sabbath. Healing isn't lawful on the Sabbath. That's doing work. And one should honor the Sabbath. It's important. But the Sabbath is a time of rejuvenation, a time of remembering that God is always healing. So maybe this is the Sabbath, and this is the moment. But he knows to draw attention to her will make her uncomfortable. So maybe the better option, wait till everyone has gone. Heal her then. Or you know what? What's 24 more hours in the face of 18 years? Just find her tomorrow. She can wait that long. But she's still shuffling along the back, and Jesus steps down from where he's speaking. Woman, he says, because he doesn't know her name. And the crowd is kind of holding their breath, and even the dust motes come to attention for a moment and stop drifting. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna castigate her for doing what's so clearly work for her on the Sabbath? Is he gonna help her find a place to sit, but then wouldn't he be working on the Sabbath? Everyone waits and holds their breath. Woman, he says, And she realizes the voice is getting closer, and the man is speaking to her, and she stiffens. She closes her eyes, waiting for what's coming. And the heart of Jesus breaks, because clearly it's more than a physical ailment that has been hurting her soul. He says, "Woman, your ailment will be healed." And with all the gentleness and kindness of how you touch an infant, or how you touch your elderly grandmother, he puts his hands across her spine. And she suddenly feels a kind of unlocking and unburdening, a kind of hot and a kind of cold. And she kind of leans forward and loses her center of gravity because it's changed. And she begins slowly to test it. Is it true? But for the first time in 18 years, she's not at a 90-degree angle. She's coming up. And the whole synagogue's eyes are like, widening. And Jesus is beaming. And she finally reaches full height and looks at him. And out of her mouth comes a psalm she's known for decades, her whole life. She can't contain the hallelujahs. And she's singing with all that she has. And she looks at him, and Jesus nods, and she just walks out the door to see the sky, to let the sun warm her upright face. And the synagogue doesn't know what to do. People are joining in the song, and people are terrified about it being the Sabbath, and there's kind of a chaos. And here come the dudes in the robes. The synagogue leader clears his throat and says, "There are 6 days, 6 of them, on which you can heal, and on which everyone here can be healed. Today's not the day. Today's not the day. Do you see the chaos?" And all the smile drains out of Jesus, and he turns on his heel. And he holds his anger, but he says, pretty sure you're going to go home and untie your ox or your donkey and give them some water. Don't you think this woman who's been suffering and bent over for 18 years should have the water of life given to her? And the synagogue leader sputters a little, and Jesus says, "What would the right day be? When would the right day come? She's here. Her suffering shouldn't have to wait. Do you think the rules are more important than people?" And Jesus looks at them, and he's saddened. But he goes out the door and joins the rejoicing people and leaves them standing there in all their finery and in all their anger. And he joins the rejoicing, shouting crowd who are so excited that life has come, that suffering is over for that woman. And see, what I wonder is, how many of us are bent over? How many of us are suffering? It comes in all kinds of forms, doesn't it? The kind of slow and steady bending that happens over decades of words said against us that are cruel. The kind of bending that happens in childhood because our family system wasn't a great one to grow up in. And we're not sure what to do with that even as we age. The kind of bending over that comes from life not being what we thought it would be. A kind of hope that drains away. A kind of expectation that eventually we know isn't going to be met. A kind of bending over because society wants us to be something we can't be. We never fully feel like ourselves, and it burdens us. And we shuffle along hoping no one really notices, maybe hoping we won't notice. But the truth of the matter is that Jesus sees the suffering. And the empathy of God goes out to us. And I wonder sometimes if we think God doesn't even notice us anymore. It's been how long? How many years? What's one more day? But suffering should be ended. And so sometimes we don't even ask or talk to God about the things that keep us bent over because we're waiting. Waiting to get our lives more together. Waiting to have a little more faith. Waiting to really believe in the right way. We're waiting till maybe we're a little bit wiser. Or maybe we think we've waited too long. Maybe we're waiting for it to be less busy or to be less stressed. We're waiting for some perfect moment, but the moment is now. It's always right for suffering to end. It's always right to name the bent overness and to open the door by naming the truth for God's healing to come. Suffering shouldn't last. It's not what God longs for people to do. And no, we don't always have the agency, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, Jesus sees us. But here's the other thing I wonder about this text. I wonder why we leave people bent over and suffering. I wonder if we really see people who are bent over and suffering. Is it just that they begin to blend into the sort of, background of our lives? It's just the way the world is. It's just the way government is. It's just the way society is. It's just that things are a little bit broken. But have we forgotten to look out and see? Do we see the single mother whose bank account is bent over and the suffering on her hungry child's face? Do we see the tent that's bent over between some trees sheltering the homeless? Do we see the grandparents bent over weeping at the tomb of their grandchild because they suffered under another mass incident of violence and shooting? Do we see the man bent over his daughter who's suffering and dying from her opioid addiction? Do we see the black mother bent over the body of her son who suffered at the hands of the police? Do we see all the people who are bent over because the loneliness and the isolation is crippling in our society? Do we see the teenagers bent over, suffering from a kind of self-hate because the bullying has gotten to be too much? Do we open our eyes and do we actually see them? Because I guarantee Jesus does. And I guarantee that if we're about the business of seeing as Jesus sees, which is the business of the church, that it's time to delay. It's time to stop not seeing. It's time to stop waiting. We can't wait for, politics to get better. We can't wait for culture to be, less conflicted. We can't wait for everybody to agree with us. We can't wait worrying that we might disagree with one another about it. We can't wait till society is ready to hear about whiteness and blackness and poor education and gun violence. We can't wait till we have our data in a line and our 10-point plan about how to, solve homelessness and mental illness and get our education system. We can't wait. People have been crippled and bent over for 18 long years. Longer than that. It's time to start seeing. It's time to start being the church. It may cost us. It won't be easy. But we have to start figuring it out. We have to start talking about what it will look like. We have to start reaching out to the suffering, to those who are bent over. There are plenty of people. This story is one that seems to be just about the Sabbath, but it's actually about power. Who has it? It's about agency. It's about waiting for the right time to come that maybe never comes. What if the right time is now? What if seeing suffering is the call of the church? Worship and justice go together. We don't come here and not go do justice in the world. Jesus looks out and he sees the suffering around him and he works to end it. Shouldn't we be doing the same?